Welcome to Paul's Passive House. As you can see, it's time for me to address the floor. If we pause here for a second, you can see how absolutely horrific this floor looks. You see evidence of all kinds of bugs and droppings from mice. And when you look over at the edge where the concrete is, you see a massive gaping crack. Now, the reason I decided to address the floor is because of this crack. You can see this is where most of the radon that's seeping up into my house is coming from. This was a guest bedroom, and as you can see, the floor is in terrible shape. I had torn out the carpet, and some of the carpet pad was left behind. That black substance you see is called mastic. Now, I had everything tested, as I always do, for asbestos, and everything came back negative, which is a complete and total relief. Getting rid of all the carpet tack, getting rid of all the pad was a huge undertaking. This is another bedroom. Here I'm taking out all the nails, vacuuming out all the bays, bleaching them, and then applying big stretch caulk. While I'm in this room, I decided to add screws to the ceiling drywall just to make sure that it was totally secure. Here you see me adding more caulk to the top sill and all the tops of those bays. The stud bays are really important to keep clean and to make sure that they're airtight. That's why I'm taking extra special care in sealing all of them with big stretch. Finally, I addressed the windows. And as you can see, now we're back in that bedroom, and I'm prepping the walls. What I'm doing here is marking the ceiling so that I can remove a 6-inch piece of drywall. Now, that's going to allow me to connect the insulation that I install on this wall with the insulation that I install in the attic. As you know, for a passive house, you have to have a continuous thermal barrier along with a continuous air barrier. If we take a minute to check on my progress, you can see the black mastic is still there, but I've taken some time to seal up all the corners, along with everything around the windows and any other spaces, holes, gaps, and whatever. Let's pause here for a second. If you look here, you can see this is a hole in my floor that used to be my old HVAC. This house, when they poured the concrete slab, underneath it they put all the plumbing and they put old clay HVAC air ducts. Those clay ducts have weathered terribly over the years and have basically become a place for mice and rats to hang out and for bugs to breed. So what I did was fill them in with foam and aggregate. This is pea gravel, and you can find it at any Home Depot or home improvement store. And that's going to provide the base for the concrete that I'm going to pour into this hole later. Now, filling this hole with concrete was by far the easiest way to resolve this. If we look to our left here, you can see the gap that was left underneath my wall. So the house, this floor was sinking along with the foundation. And as you can see, I filled that hole, that gap, the gap that exists underneath the wall between the foundation and the wall, with wood and foam. I ran that foam up through the corners as well and sealed all the top plates, all the sill plates, and all the bays. So all these bays, you can see all that caulk in there, seals up every little possible place for air to escape. I'm going to come back a little bit later and show you a whole lot more. This large hole in the floor is where the air duct ran from the attic into the floor and distributed the air throughout the house. Now that air duct was covered in asbestos. I had that tested and I wrapped it in cellophane, taped it real good, then cut it and then disposed of it. Then I scrubbed the air with a HEPA filter and wiped everything down in this room. And that was before I took up all the drywall. As you can see, I've removed almost all the drywall in this room, and this wall right here is going to be torn out. Now that's the hole that led up into my attic where my furnace used to be. As you saw in, I think it was episode 1, I have uninstalled my furnace. This is just a quick look at my work area and the mess that I'm going to have to clean up over the next few months. One last look in this room before I get ready to prep this floor for a leveling pour. I'm going to level all this concrete. This room also has a lot of mastic. Now, it's important that you use some kind of board like this ram board. This ram board is super useful for all kinds of things. In fact, right now, as I speak into this microphone, my living room has ram board in it. And it's covering the cork underlayment that I laid down in that room. Now, I haven't found appropriate flooring for my living room, but in place of flooring, this ram board works really, really well. One last look at this corner here. You see that I sealed it all up with spray foam. I also put in some copper mesh to keep mice out of there. And I've sealed all the sill plates. I've sealed around all the windows. Here we see after I've poured the concrete. If we pause here for a second, you can see that that aggregate that was down at the bottom is now covered with concrete. It's really important that you water concrete. That's why it looks wet, because I just got done watering it. And let's take a look at this gap. You can still see a pretty big gap between the foundation and the wall. Now, I've since filled that gap, but here I've cut away all the foam that I used to have, and you can actually see the measurements here for how big the gap was. It was 5/8 inch in this corner, plus. It was 1/2 inch just to the right of that corner, plus. So I got pressure-treated wood and put it underneath in that gap, nailed it in place, and then filled with the rest with foam. Here's a space that I haven't filled yet. There's another hole that I filled with concrete. As you can see, it's still wet. Another hole filled with concrete, my old HVAC. I moved all the HVAC up into the attic, which I'm going to claim as conditioned space in the finalizing of this project. Here you see I just went past a 1/2 inch mark. That's all been filled with foam and pressure treated wood. As we get closer and closer to the corner, you can see the gap gets bigger and bigger. It's 1 inch at this point. And finally, in the corner where it gets to 1 1/8 inches, it's a huge gap. And there you get to see some of the pressure treated wood, plus some of the shims that I had to use, plus some of the caulking and some of the foam. Now the foam runs the entire sill plate and is just one aspect of sealing this bottom sill that I'm going to employ. Finally, you see the concrete that I put in that hole, and unfortunately there's still a hole in my ceiling. One last walkthrough as we take just a quick look at some of the foam spaces where nails were coming through that I wanted to make sure I got airtight. And I got a little ahead of myself. You can see there's some mineral wool in place there. And I don't know what I'm trying to show you there, but you get to see it nonetheless. My insulating strategy is to utilize mineral wool along with spray foam. You get to see some of the copper mesh there to keep out rodents and bugs. And on top of that, I'm going to be putting 3.5-inch polyiso. I took a lot of extra time to seal up around the windows. All the 2x4s around the windows have big stretch caulk and foam, and they're going to get 3.5 inches of polyiso board on top of that, which is also going to be sealed. The key here is to stop air from moving through these spaces. Now you can see here there's been a lot of water infiltration over the years under this window, and that's probably because I don't have any overhangs. That is going to be remedied in the final phase of this project when I switch to the outdoor work. But look at all the big stretch, look at all the caulk, look at all the spray foam. This was quite an undertaking. I don't know what I'm looking at there, but you get to see it nonetheless. Now, one important thing to remember is that there shouldn't be any gaps at the top of these stud bays. You don't want any space for air and moisture to infiltrate. Here we take a look at the gap that I cut in the ceiling. That's all going to be connected to an air barrier that's in my attic. It's not yet installed, but you get to see the big stretch at the top of the sill plate. You get to see big stretch and caulk at the bottom of the sill plate and in the stud bays and where the sheathing meets from the exterior. Now you'll notice I have a lot of gaps, but I filled those gaps with foam, so I shouldn't get any air infiltration into these stud bays. Finally, we see I put down a primer over that mastic. Now, this primer is a special primer that I'll link to in the description. It's a very high-end primer, it's a good primer, and it's specifically for encapsulating asbestos. Now, that mastic was not asbestos, but the primer that I used is for all manner of floor coverings and for asbestos and for pretty much anything that might be found on a concrete floor. You can use this primer to seal it in, and then you can lay floor over it, or in my case, I'm going to put over a floor leveler. And here I primed this floor as well. Again, we can look at this gap and you can see that I've installed the 3.5-inch polyiso in the attic. That's the polyiso that I'm going to connect to. I decided to take out this wall. This was a bedroom and it was right next to my living room, but my living room was so small and so cramped that I wanted to open it up. So I decided to take this wall out. Now, in doing so, I've opened up tons of space in my living room, but I've caused myself a problem. I need another bedroom. Any decent house has 3 bedrooms. So I've had to redesign my master bedroom to be 2 bedrooms instead of 1. Now, luckily, the master bedroom was very large. Now, unluckily, the master bedroom was very poorly designed. But because it's so big, I can turn it into 2 120 to 140 square foot bedrooms with 2 giant walk-in closets. The main bedroom, the new master, will have his and hers closets. So that's going to be a huge upgrade to this property. Now, as you can see, I'm exposing another exterior wall. This is the exterior wall to the front of my house. That's my front door. And I'm going to have to go through the exact same process I went through with all the other walls. I'm going to have to bleach all those stud bays. I'm going to have to big stretch all the gaps, all the sill plates, top and bottom. And there, I'm trying to figure out how to get this stud out. I can't decide if this is load bearing or not. As it turns out, it's not. But I treated it like it was, because it is in the middle of the house. If there is a load-bearing wall, that's the one. So I pretended it was, even though I'm pretty sure it's not. It doesn't have a double stud at the top, and so I don't think it's load bearing. But I sat and looked at it and measured it for quite a while before I decided. If we pause here, you can see there that there's 1, 2, 3 studs right in a row. That's what made me think that this was load bearing. Now, it turns out it wasn't load bearing, but like I said, I treated it as if it was. So I was very careful with this particular wall. As it turns out, this house isn't wide enough to require a load bearing studded wall. So it doesn't have one. You'll notice in these playbacks that I do a lot of standing around and thinking. It's very difficult when you've never done this before to figure out exactly what you're supposed to do next. Now, I have a game plan in my mind, and I go through it over and over and over again each night before bed. But while you're actually doing it, you run into all kinds of problems. Here you can see I'm cleaning out all the rat poop and mouse poop and debris left over from taking out that drywall. And I'm doing a good job of vacuuming everything very, very thoroughly. Now you get to see the wall pretty close to completion. It's not totally done, but it's getting there. You see there's mineral wool on the exterior walls. That's going to be covered by 3.5-inch thick polyiso board, which you can see there at the top. All these stud bays were sealed. I'm showing you all the caulking and all the sealing around the windows. And that 3.5-inch polyiso board, that provides me with an R39 wall. That's a fantastic R value for exterior walls in the state of Colorado. As you can see, this polyiso is still rough. I pre-hung it just with 2 screws just to see it go in, just to get a concept of how it's going to go in. I haven't even poured the floor leveling yet, so I'm way ahead of myself here. But you can see I wanted to get in as much of this insulation as possible. And already I started noticing improvements in comfort in the house. First of all, the noise levels decreased by quite a bit, although my windows are quite noisy. These windows, these old vinyl slider windows, are terrible. And that's it. In the next episode, I'm going to pour my concrete floor. If you'd like a free energy efficiency consultation, please email me at paulspassivehouse@gmail.com.